Hey y'all, this lesson is about how to convert a number from a fraction to a decimal. I'm going to start with the number 3/4 because it's a simple number, and even though most of you probably know what the answer is, I want to walk you through the steps and the common mistakes. I have a little trick that helps students never forget how to go from a fraction to a decimal. So 3/4, how do we change 3/4 into its decimal form? Well, most students have no problem telling me, well, you divide. Yes, you divide. Okay, well, let's go off to the side and do that division. And when we do that, they typically try to say, okay, you divide. You divide 3 by 4. Well, they said it right, but then they wrote it wrong. The reason they wrote it wrong is because they want the big number to go in the house. It makes them uncomfortable not to have it that way. The big number has to be in the house because you can't do this. You can't put 3 inside and 4 outside. That just won't work because you can't get 4 out of 3. Well, you can. Just like if you had a pizza and it came to your house messed up for some reason and it came in 3 pieces. So you have 3 and you have 4 people eating that pizza. So you need to divide those 3 into 4 pieces. We want to take 3 and divide it by 4. Well, each person obviously can't get a whole piece because there's not enough of these to go around. But if you made your piece smaller, then we could divide it. So you can take 3 and divide it by 4. It just isn't going to be a whole piece. So this, no. Big no. The way we always remember what goes in the house. It might be the big number. It might be the small number. It's the number that's on top. Period. End of story. It doesn't matter if it's bigger or smaller. And to help remember this, we use a horse and cowboy trick. So when they come to me and say, I can't remember how to make this a decimal. Do I put the 3 in the house or the 4 in the house? I always say, you do the horse and cowboy. And so horse and cowboy is silly. I have a couple pictures. You have a horse and you have a cowboy. You have a horse and a cowboy. Who's going to ride on top, the horse or the cowboy? They always say, well, duh, the cowboy rides on top of the horse. You can't put the horse on top of the cowboy. That would be ridiculous. So the cowboy rides on top of the horse. So if we're talking about 3/4, then that must mean since 3 is on top and 4 is on bottom, I'll ask them, well, which one's the cowboy and which one's the horse? And they'll say, well, 3 is the cowboy and 4 is the horse. Yep, that's right, because 3 rides on top of 4 and cowboys ride on top of horses. So we kind of remember the 3 is the cowboy and the 4 is the horse. And then I say, okay, well, if 3 is the cowboy and 4 is the horse, which one goes inside? Well, cowboys live in houses. Horses stay outside. They live in barns maybe, but that's not a house. So cowboys go in the house, horses stay outside. Let's go through that again. Which one's the horse and which one's the cowboy? Well, 3 is the cowboy because it rides on top of the horse, so 4 is the horse. Well, who lives inside? Well, cowboys live inside. Horses stay outside. So now that we've set it up, we just do the division. And yes, you're right. You can't get 4 out of 3 when it's written like this, but if we write it like this, we can start to figure out how to get 4 out of 3. So we added the 0.0. This is still 3. It's still the number 3. We have simply made it so that we have enough digits to work with here. So we bring the decimal up top, very important. 4 can come out of 30. You can get 4 out of 30 7 times. 7 times 4 is 28. So we're going to have, when we subtract, we're going to have 2 left over. So then we're going to add another 0. Bring it on down. 4 goes into 20 5 times. 4 times 5 is 20, so we're going to have nothing left. So we have just taken 4 3/4 and converted it to a decimal by dividing with the horse and cowboy method. So 3/4 is the same as 0.75 or 75 hundredths. Pretty simple because most people already know 0.75, 75 hundredths, that's like 75 cents. That's the same thing as 3/4 of a dollar, because you could get 3/4 out of a dollar, and you could get 4/4. We know quarters, we know 0.75. This one's not all that hard. Let's look at one that might be a little more challenging. If we had 3/8, 3/8. All right, we need to change 3/8 from a fraction to a decimal. How are we going to do that? Well, we've got to divide. Okay, well, which one's the horse and which one's the cowboy? Well, cowboy's right on top of horses, so 3 is the cowboy and 8 is the horse. Great. All right, so who's going to go inside? Well, cowboys go inside. Horses stay outside. So now we're going to have to add our 0.0 because obviously we're not going to get 8 out of 3. There's not any way to do that. So we're going to add the 0.0 and we can get 8 out of 30. 8 out of 30, that goes 3 times because 8 times 3 is 24. And then we're going to subtract and see what we have left. We have 6 left. Bring down a 0. 8 goes into 60 7 times because 8 times 7 is 56. When we subtract, we see that we have 4 remaining. We're going to go again, add another 0, bring it down. 8 goes into 40 5 times because 8 times 5 is 40. We're going to have nothing left. So we have just determined that 3/8, when we use the horse and cowboy method of dividing, tells us that its decimal equivalent is 0.375 or 375 thousandths. All right, now, I said it doesn't matter if it's big or small. We typically would not have to do this, but just in case, let's say we had 5/4. Obviously, there are better ways to do this. 5/4 means that you've got a hole in there, because 4/4 would be one hole. So if we pulled that 4/4 out, that would be one hole. We would still have 1/4 left. So we wouldn't really leave this as 5/4. We would probably write it as 1 1/4, and then 1/4, we could easily change that to a decimal, probably without even doing the math. But just in case, I wanted to point out, if you have an improper fraction, and that's what this is when you have a hole inside of it that hasn't been pulled out, you know it's improper because the top number's bigger. But if you were going to try to make this fraction into a decimal, I would still ask you, well, which one's the horse and which one's the cowboy? Well, the cowboy sits on top of the horse who's on the bottom. And so then if we went and we put our cowboy in the house and left our horse outside in the stable, we can get 4 out of 5. We can get 4 out of 5 one time. And 1 times 4 is 4, so we will have 1 left over. Now we're going to add a decimal, carry it up to the top, and a 0. Bring down your 0. Now we have 4. We can get 4 out of 10 twice. 4 times 2 is 8. So when we subtract, we'll have 2 left. We're going to continue. We're going to bring down another 0. We can get 4 out of 20 5 times. 4 times 5 is 20, so we will have nothing left. So we have just figured out our fraction turned into a decimal. 1.25 or 1 25/100 is the same or equivalent to 5/4. Down here, we would have gotten the same thing. We would have said, well, it's 1, and then what's 1/4 as a decimal? Well, 1/4 is the same as 0.25. If you didn't know that, you would have taken your 1/4 and gone off and done the horse and cowboy. So we can do this with small numbers. We can also do this with very large numbers. We could have 20 over 54. It doesn't matter what the numbers are. Now, you can do this with horse and cowboy just like it is, and make your 20 the cowboy, the 54 the horse, put your cowboy in the house and your horse outside and get busy dividing. But, whoo, that would be some ugly numbers. So remember to always simplify first. These are both obviously even numbers, so they could both be divided by 2, and then that would make it a little simpler. 20 divided by 2 would leave 10. 54 divided by 2 would leave 27. So still not super pretty, but it would be a lot nicer to have my cowboy be the 10 and my horse be the 27. Because then when I put my cowboy in the house and leave my horse outside, it's not quite as large and monstrous. So I can't get 27 out of 10, so I'm going to put my decimal and carry it up, make it a 0.0. And then here is where you have to start doing the hard math. And I'm not going to go through this problem because I don't want this video to go on and on forever, but I just wanted you to remember that we have a horse and cowboy anytime we're trying to change a fraction to a decimal. And if you remember the horse and cowboy, you will always remember which number goes in the house and which one stays outside. Thanks for watching.